You are listening to Kelly and Laura, just two unfiltered mums here to share the raw reality of parenthood. Hi everyone, welcome back to #MumLife. So today we will be talking about a topic that is very personal, emotional and real. It's a topic that's often whispered about, yet it affects so many people, and that is miscarriage. So before we dive in, I will remind everyone that the content we discuss today may be emotional and quite triggering for some people, but throughout this episode we hope to remind you that you're not alone, and this is a safe space for you to listen to, hopefully to relate to as well, and reflect on. So this episode is dedicated to my dear friend and fabulous co-host Laura, who is going to be so brave and to share her personal journey with all of us today. Laura, I know I haven't personally gone through what you have, but I'm here to listen and learn as well as others. But I just want to say that I'm just so sorry that you had to go through all of it. I know, I really am, because it's just, I know it's been such a tough time, tough journey through it all. But your strength through all the traumas has been quite remarkable, to be honest.
There were times when I didn't feel like that, which we will go into.
I know, but no, it is. Yeah, you have, and I really admire the way that you've navigated through all the challenges of having the miscarriages, and I love you. So
thank you. I love you too. But no, thank you. I mean, I just wanted to talk about it because it, like we said, it is and still is such a taboo subject, and I think sometimes I shock people when I just come out and say it, because I think, well, why would you not talk about it? It's part of me, it's part of my journey, and without them I wouldn't have George and Isla, and there's I just think, I don't know why people feel like they can't talk about it, because I certainly felt better when I started opening up and talking about them. So I really wanted to just raise awareness, and like you said, our inbox is always open, you can talk to us anytime, and hopefully people will take something away from this episode.
So do you want to start with sharing your story with our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have had 4 miscarriages in total. So I had 3 before George, and they were with a previous relationship. And then I had 1 in between George and Isla. There are different miscarriages. I don't know if people know that. So I was quite fortunate in that mine were all fairly early on, varying slightly, but fairly early. So I had 2 chemical pregnancies, a missed miscarriage, and then one that's called a blighted ovum, or a silent miscarriage it can be called. Quite a range.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit more about what those different types are? Because I'm just not aware of those different types.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a bit more context with them as well. So a chemical pregnancy is anything up to about 5 weeks of being pregnant. So actually they say that people only really know about these as miscarriages now because we have the more sensitive tests. So you have the tests now that are up to 6 days before your period, and all of those sorts of tests, which back in the day they didn't have. So a lot of women just didn't know that they'd miscarried. So my first one, now I know we spoke about our symptoms. So my symptoms were wild. I 100% knew. Yeah, my nausea, my chest, everything. I was just knew straight away. So I took the test, and I think I was probably 2, maybe 3 days before my period was due, and it came up straight away. And then I think my period was probably only a few days late, so I was probably pregnant knowing for a week. And then I just woke up one morning and there was just a lot of blood, and then by the time I went to the doctor, I didn't really know what to do. That was the thing, being your first pregnancy as well, I had no idea what to do.
Well, you don't do, you haven't got a clue. Wow.
No, I was just oh my gosh. So I rang the doctors, and they said to obviously come in, and then she did a pregnancy test. She said, I'm really sorry, you're now not pregnant. And
Oh,
I was like, oh, wow. So for a first pregnancy, a week doesn't sound like a long time. And I think it's one of those where you think like, I mean, does it count? Does it not? And of course it absolutely does.
of
But there is
course.
under miscarriage, there is that sort of like, oh, when do you count it? When do you not? But yeah, it was over Mother's Day as well that weekend.
Oh, mate.
Yeah, so you've got it in your head, haven't you? As soon as you find out, you're planning, you're
Oh,
thinking of
absolutely.
stuff.
Names,
Yeah,
everything. Yeah.
everything. So yeah, and yeah, the advice really I was given then was, oh, you can just try again straight away if you want to, and that was really
Really?
it. That was the only advice and sort of thing I was given. Yeah,
Oh my goodness.
which was a really like,
I find that quite bizarre, actually.
yeah. It's literally what the doctor said.
Oof, well.
So yeah, so that was the first one. That was a chemical, and then the one in between George and Isla was also a chemical. So again, very very early on.
Hmm.
That was obviously like my 5th pregnancy. So again, I knew I'd taken a test way too early, I think, because I have really long cycles. So I took a test too early, which was negative.
Hmm.
And I thought, oh, do you know what? I remember saying to Matt, I'm just going to test like towards the end of next week when my period's late. Like we know, so it's
Yeah.
fine again because of symptoms. And I just remember playing with George, and I just looked at Matt and I was like, I need to just excuse myself for a minute. And it was the
You
same
knew.
thing, and I was just like, oh god. But again, it's one of those, I didn't actually have the positive test of that one, but I just knew. And they say that with a chemical pregnancy it can just be like a heavier period,
Hmm.
and more intense cramping, and that was one of the telltale signs for me, because my periods are quite bad, but I tend to take painkillers maybe the first day and then I'm all right.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Day 3 I was still having to take them like pretty much
Really?
spot on, yeah, because the cramping was really really bad, and that's just that's just how I knew. I was like, this is
Hmm.
just not a normal, a normal cycle. So yeah, so those were the chemical ones, which they class obviously as super super early. So yeah, then my second miscarriage, and this one was the most traumatic, and I know we'll go into that in a little bit. So this one was a missed miscarriage, which is essentially where the baby has died, but the woman has no symptoms. So I had no bleeding, I had no pain, and it was only when I went for the 12-week scan that they saw everything they needed to see, but they obviously
Hmm.
didn't see a heartbeat. So they thought, oh, maybe because of my cycles, I'm just really behind and I've just got my dates completely wrong. So they rang the early pregnancy unit, and they were like, well, we'll just need to leave it 2 weeks. Now, in hindsight, what they were
Really?
doing, yeah, they were waiting for my body to naturally miscarry,
Oh my goodness.
but my body didn't. So
Oh.
I then went back 2 weeks later.
Hmm.
I still had no symptoms, and they scanned me, and it was just like, yeah, not viable. So effectively, I was
God.
14 weeks technically, but baby was 7 or 8.
Oh.
But what I wasn't told with that one was that there would be quite a lot to come away, let's say.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
wasn't really told much about that side of things. So I wasn't really prepared mentally or physically for it. So my body actually started contracting.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
and I had
What?
no idea what it was, like no idea what was happening. So they basically had booked me in for to come back a week later. So if my body hadn't done it naturally, they were going to have to operate, which is called a medically managed miscarriage.
Right.
So I just trying to take my mind off things, was just sat in a cafe, and then I was like, oh god, I'm in loads of pain, and then I was like, oh no, I'm not anymore. Oh my god, I'm in loads of pain again. I didn't realize they were contractions.
Gosh, I didn't know. I didn't know. I didn't know the body could do that early on. If I'm
Yeah,
honest,
well,
at
because
all.
my body had obviously then registered and just needed to, do its thing for it to come away. So luckily, I made it home,
Hmm.
and then my body miscarried naturally. But that
Was that a
was,
matter of as well that like you just had that news and right off you go back home to deal with it in your
yeah,
own way?
yeah,
Oh man, that's
yeah.
just
And that's the thing.
Not good.
I just wish I'd have been told that your body will contract and it will have to, do you know what I mean? Like, that's what we're hoping will happen, because they hope it happens naturally, because when they have to do surgery, it can leave scar tissue. It can also cause damage. So they hope that it happens naturally. But I just, I mean, probably me being really naive. But again, that was like only my second miscarriage. So I didn't know what to expect, really. And then, like I said, that was just quite traumatic, because I went into shock, I think.
I'm not surprised.
I actually had a work event that night and I just went to it like 2 hours later, because I think I just didn't
register it. It was still in shock.
Didn't really know what to do. Do I just sit at home and cry? Like, no idea. So just went to this work event, and it was on the way home. I was like, oh, this has just happened. Quite huge. Probably shouldn't have gone. So that was the second one. And then the third one this is called a blighted ovum. This is a bit of an odd one in a sense, because again, I had the positive pregnancy test, although looking back, the line was a bit faint, which I didn't really think too much of, but apparently, might have been a contributing factor, or should have been maybe a bit of a clue. But I had no pain or anything like that. I still had symptoms. They weren't really, really strong, but again, went on Dr. Google, that's fine. Some people don't have any symptoms, all of this. So again, got to the 12-week scan, and it was a blighted ovum, which means they could see the sac, but the embryo wasn't there.
Oh, wow.
I'd actually had spotting the night before. Not heavy or anything like that, but just faint. And I was like, oh, this isn't great. But because we had the scan, but 111 said, you've got your scan, but we won't be able to get you in any earlier anyway. So just stick to your appointment tomorrow.
Right. Oh, okay. It was the next day, right? I was thinking it was going to be like a week or something.
No.
Oh my goodness. Oh God.
And then went for the 12-week scan, and they couldn't see an embryo. So what can happen is really, really early on, it can just be like resorbed back into the body.
Oh my goodness. I never knew this could happen.
Yeah.
When you hear like miscarriage, it's a term used, albeit quite negative when you think about it, when it's called like a miscarriage, or when we talk about loss and all that stuff. But I never understood or knew all these different types of things that can happen. We talked about in our previous episode about pregnancy and giving birth, everything, all the things that can go wrong or not to plan. But I don't know, when you get pregnant, you just hope. I know there is a bit of anxiety there and the fear of, you want everything to go well and smoothly. But this is all new news to me. This is.
Yeah, I think that was a big thing as well. Like, a lot of, like, my mum had a couple of miscarriages, so I knew about them vaguely. Yeah. But none of my friends had miscarriages, and a couple of them had babies. And I think it was just one of those where I just didn't even really think about it as being a possibility. I think nobody does, really, because quite rightly, you're focused on the positive, you're focused on names and which bedroom and what it's going to look like, and nursery and things like that. So I just didn't really. But obviously, as they progressed, and obviously I had one, then another. Every pregnancy then, including Georgian Islands, was just not enjoyable. Like, obviously I was just filled with dread and anxiety. Not dread as in like, oh God, I'm pregnant. It was more like, oh, I just don't know how this is going to work out. What am I going to have to go through this time? It was just, they were very anxiety filled.
You know what you say about the miscarriage as well. And one of my closest friends, we were pregnant at the same time, and she unfortunately had the same experience. And it shook me to the core, because when I was pregnant, albeit feeling sick, because I had those symptoms, I kind of assumed everything was okay. And she was still experiencing all those same symptoms as well. I know, like you said, that you didn't have any symptoms as such, but, she felt pregnant, and she...
Well, with the second one I did. Yeah. The second one I had all the symptoms right up. Yeah.
So, but that terrified me. That kind of immediately changed my anxiety levels around pregnancy, because I thought, oh my God, I didn't even know this could happen. Yeah. So I think it's good from an awareness, albeit we don't want to worry people or anything like that. It's not intentional, but it's I think it's just good to talk about it. And I suppose it's just such a subject that many people probably find very difficult to talk about. I mean, can you talk us through some of the emotions you experienced during the times when you had
Yeah,
these
of course. Obviously,
miscarriages?
up until this point, I've been quite matter of fact, and that's obviously
Yeah.
deliberate, just to let people know the different types. But yeah, especially with the third pregnancy. Sorry, I had to think which one it was. The third pregnancy, the second one. Sorry, there's a second pregnancy. There was a couple of friends that found out at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
so our due dates would have been the same. So I obviously what happened to me, but then obviously they had baby showers.
Mm.
They, we were all due within a week of each other, and that was just so hard. Like, I had one friend with her baby shower, which she was gorgeous about it, and she just sort of said, obviously there's no expectation of you coming at all.
Mm-hmm.
Just let you know, it's more like an afternoon tea. Like, husbands are invited. There's going to be none of those sorts of games. It's just, it's more just an afternoon tea than a baby shower. And I was so
Yeah.
grateful. I don't know how much of it was down to me. Do you know what I mean? But it was
Yeah.
just, and I ended up going, of course I did. I ended up driving my friend who was also pregnant at the time. Like, it was
Oh,
just,
mate.
I
Oh,
know, I
bless
was
you.
just surrounded by it. But I think you feel like you're surrounded by it whenever you go through something like that,
Yeah. Well
But
done for going, though. I don't know whether I could have gone to something like that.
there was one I didn't go to, because I knew it was their second child, and I knew that it was very game orientated, and
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't. I
Just too
just knew that
much.
I couldn't. It was only because she'd said that it wasn't, husbands were there, and it was a different type of format that I could go.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, with the emotions, I think it's more. I think I got to the point, especially after the third one, I just thought I couldn't have kids.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is all I've ever wanted, was to be a mum. Ever since, I've got younger brothers that I mothered terribly, like since the age of like 9, I was like mothering them. They still don't thank me for it, but it's all I ever wanted to do, was to be
Yeah.
a mum. I didn't care about career, anything like that as such.
Mm.
That's all I wanted, all I wanted. And it got to the third one, and I knew that after the third one there was something wrong, because I knew after the third one testing happens and investigations happens. And
Mm-hmm.
it was that realization of, I might not be able to carry my own child.
Mm.
So do I adopt?
Yeah.
Do I foster? Do I look for a surrogate? Do I try IVF? But the issue, like, for me, I got pregnant every time I tried.
Yeah.
So
No problem conceiving,
no
did you? It
problem
was,
conceiving. And this
yeah.
is what, some of the doctors were confused about. They were like, normally with fertility we see issues getting pregnant, or you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? No issue getting pregnant at all. It was keeping it.
Yeah.
And it's so difficult in those early stages of pregnancy as well for them to find out what's wrong, because obviously by the time I got the scans it was too late. So
Oh
it was
God.
really difficult for them to detect what any problem was, if there was a problem, at what stage there's a
Mm-hmm.
problem.
You must have thought, is there something wrong with my body? I know
Yeah.
probably many women, would probably question themselves, is it me, or blame themselves in a situation like this? And that's such a heavy question for a woman to carry around.
Oh,
Do you
I
know
know.
what I mean?
And you're right. That's exactly what I was asking. I was thinking, my body can't do the one thing it's built to do. Like,
Yeah. And you
and
think, why? Yeah, why? What's
yeah,
going on?
like, I was personal training, so I was super fit. Like, my diet was on point. I was like the fittest I'd ever been. And I was thinking, what is it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't smoke. I don't do drugs. I stopped drinking. And it was just, I just couldn't find an answer for it. And I think that was the most frustrating part. And then obviously being surrounded by babies and pregnant friends, and
It's a lot.
it's a lot. And I don't know, because it's difficult because you're so happy for them.
Yeah.
And I think that's what was such a challenge. I was so happy for them, and I obviously cuddled the babies and loved it, and I never wanted to take
Mm-hmm.
anything away from them. But at the same time, it's really difficult when that's all you want.
Oh, of course. I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine.
But
You did so well in those situations.
looking back, but it's funny looking back now, I don't know if I could do it, but I don't know if that's because I've now got
Yeah.
George and Isla,
Yeah.
actually that was what was with the fourth miscarriage, like the one in between George and Isla, was that one was very different emotion wise, because with the 3 leading up to George, I didn't know if my body could do it. I didn't quite know what I was losing because I'd never had a child.
Mm-hmm.
And it was quite difficult to navigate emotion wise. Like, should I grieve? Should I not? I'm grieving technically something that wasn't there. Like, I went through all those. I almost was challenging myself on the grief. And actually what's really important is you grieve however you want to. You deal with miscarriage however you want to. There's no right way to do it.
No.
And I think I was searching for a right way, somebody to say, this is how you should be feeling.
Yeah.
And I just, you can't put your finger on it. But with the fourth, it was very different because, again, I was lucky. It was early on, but I'd had George. Mm-hmm. So I knew my body could do it at that point.
Yeah.
So there wasn't that like, oh my God, am I ever going to have another child? I didn't have that. But then I knew what I'd lost. Because I had George sat in front of me. So it was like, oh my God.
Oh God.
Yeah. So it was a very different shift in emotions to the first 3, definitely. But I weirdly, I was almost relieved. I was relieved that it was early. I was relieved it was natural. I was relieved. And it's funny because you think you're relieved with this miscarriage. And you think, well, yeah, because I know what happens further down the line. And I know how, horrendous it can be, and finding out 12 weeks. It gave me really bad PTSD for scans.
I'm not surprised at all, actually.
Because the second and third were at the 12 week. Really bad PTSD. So when we had George and I'll talk a bit more about scans with them in a little bit, but I just couldn't I just burst into tears. Just couldn't, no matter what stage, even at in my area, they did a 36-week scan, still cried.
Really?
I
say really, but gosh, it's
just can't walk into a scan room. And actually it's why, I always said I wanted loads and loads of kids, but actually
football team.
My football teams are strong too. I just don't think I can do it again mentally.
It's a great too, though. It's a great too.
But it's all that side of it as well that people might not necessarily realise. You think, oh yeah, of course you're going to be anxious with pregnant, but it's the other side of it as well. Constantly symptom checking, which, like you said, doesn't even technically mean anything, because with the miscarriages you can still have pregnancy symptoms. But one of my really bad ones that I would do is just touch my chest just to check it was still sore, which sounds really odd, but it was like a nervous thing I would do, and had to be really conscious when I was out in public that I wasn't just looking really weird, but I would just do a quick touch either side and be like, okay, they still sensitive, still hurt, okay, the hormones are still there. And I did that right up until the kids were born.
I'm so sorry. Oh, bless you. I think it's so hard, I think, knowing that your friend's going through such trauma, and it's not just one is more than enough, but for you to have multiple experiences, and, I just can't even imagine how hard that was. And I'm just so sorry that you went through that. But I suppose in these situations, it's so important to have the right people around you as well, for support network and different things to help support you. So I suppose what was kind of your comfort in regards to support during this?
Obviously family and friends were brilliant, really, really good. I think people that didn't necessarily understand it, there was almost like a natural distance, but that's fine. I never had that against anybody, because it's such a, like we've said, a serious subject. If you don't really know how to handle it, or I had some friends that were pregnant and I knew that they felt really awkward telling me, which I felt awful for. So I think it's one of those. I think when you go through any sort of trauma, it's that saying, isn't it? Who your friends are, the ones that stand by you, the ones that are there. After the third, I will openly admit I went off the rails, drinking a lot, partying a lot, basically doing anything I could to detach myself from any emotion and the situation. So I had a couple of very good friends who would happily jump on a plane with me somewhere whenever I just wanted to go away for a few days. they both lived in London as well, so it was just really easy for me to hop on a train after work and just be like, let's just go crazy this weekend because I don't really want to deal with anything.
Yeah.
So I did, and then I had obviously really close friends that just knew that I needed to do that because it'd been so intense with the 3, and because I got pregnant basically the month after each one. It was super intense. So they were there for me, but let me do what I needed to do, and then were there to help me, pick me back up, because ultimately I did crash, which is inevitable because you have to deal with it. You have to deal with the trauma and you have to deal with those emotions. You can't shut them out forever. So I did crash. So they were then there to help pick up the pieces and put me back together again, which I will forever be grateful for, because I don't think I really realised how sort of out of control, I say out of control, like my behaviour, I guess, was just careless. I just didn't really care, didn't really think.
But it was probably easier for you to feel like that than to actually sit and feel the emotions that you actually needed to. You know?
Absolutely. And I think I was trying to go back to this person that I was before, like, at uni and growing up, like this party person, people person. And obviously when trying to conceive and being pregnant, that obviously completely changed. So then I was like, right, I need to go back to this person and try and find that person again. But obviously you've just been through quite a bit, so you're not that same person.
No.
So I then did pay for some private therapy as well, because I found, especially with the 3rd pregnancy, I'd almost like become obsessed. I needed to have a baby. Like I was going to have a baby. I was going to do it. And my mindset just wasn't healthy about it. And I thought, I need to help somebody just go through this, deal with it, and help me shift my mindset so that if and when I get pregnant again, I can handle it differently. I can, so that was incredible. My therapist was amazing through that. And then there's also the charity Tommy's as well. So they were also really, really good. Spoke to a few people from there that just offered some really, really good support. They're an amazing charity, and they've actually been working with Myleene Class and have just last month changed the law on what happens in terms of miscarriage. I don't know if people have seen this in the media. So when I had my miscarriages, it was only after number 3 I was then had appointments and investigations.
Yeah, and that blows my mind, because it's so reactive, not preventative, isn't it? That approach.
Absolutely. So so the process I had was, after the 3rd, I then was put forward for investigation. So I had internal scans to check womb and everything like that, and everything looked fine. I was then under a specialist. He was incredible. Had a really good appointment with him, and then he basically was like, I'm going to run every blood test I could ever possibly run that would give any reason for a miscarriage.
Wow.
So, like, those little bottles that they obviously fill up for a blood test, I remember there was like 20, I'm not even exaggerating.
Really? Wow.
And he was like, you'll need a seat. And I remember
a bit lightheaded.
like towards the end, I had to like fling my legs up and like put my chair back. But he was like, I want everything ruled out. So we're testing for absolutely. So I was just like, fine, like this could be something for me. Like I could get an answer. All came back absolutely fine. There was no reason for it.
Oh God, I bet that was, in a way, it's like you don't want anything to be wrong, but you want an explanation as to why it's happening, don't you?
Yeah, and I'm really like that as a person. Like, if there's a reason, fine, I can deal with that, I can move on.
Yeah.
So no reason. I thought, this can just happen. I said to him, this can just happen again. And he said, yeah, it can, because I there's no answer I can give you. But what I will do is, when you next get pregnant, you will be scanned 6, 8, 10 weeks and 12 weeks.
Okay.
He said, I do not want you to have that wait until the 12-week scan again, because obviously that was so detrimental with the 3rd one, with like my mental health, and
of course, yeah,
going into that scan room at 12 weeks, knowing what I should be seeing and what I didn't, what I saw instead. So that was brilliant. So I had that with George. So the 6-week scan, they were like, we won't see a heartbeat, or we're not looking for one, we're looking just to make sure everything's there that should be. And then 8 weeks, they were like, we need to see a heartbeat, won't talk to you until I find it. And then they were brilliant straight away, found the heartbeat, and we're like, there we go.
Oh my God, I bet that moment was just
oh my God, I can't remember the rest of the appointment. I just cried so much, and Matt was
Mm.
just there, like he was crying as well, and like it was just, I'll never ever forget that moment. It was just
Oh.
wild. And then then I was scanned again at 10 weeks. We still hadn't told anybody. I was scanned again at 10 weeks, and then again at 12.
Yeah.
So that care was brilliant once, but it was just a shame I had to get to 3 to then get that.
Yeah. To get them to actually do something about it.
And then
So is this, sorry, with Miley, is this bringing in that they get earlier?
Yeah, so after your first miscarriage,
Tests.
you'll get GP support. So
Right.
straight away you're into some sort of support network. So that can vary depending on what the miscarriage is, the type, and what support you need. After your second miscarriage in a row, I think it's, or just your second miscarriage, you're in appointments, you're in investigations. So what I had after the third.
Wow.
And
okay.
then if you have 3, you're then straight under consultant and specialist care.
Okay. So
and
you're
then
not just sent home then, just to deal with it?
Not just sent home, no. And then 24/7 access to care at all times, no matter what pregnancy it is. And then they're retraining GPs and medical staff to be able to deal with miscarriage
amazing.
in a specialist way. So that's incredible. Because
So
even
incredible.
with Isla, like the fourth miscarriage, I didn't go to a doctor about again, which sounds wild, because I knew I knew I wasn't. I knew there's nothing they could do.
I bet you felt quite defeated at that point, though, to be told, because let's be honest, with your experience by then, you hadn't really had any support or advice or anything, so you probably thought, well, what's the point? I've just got to deal with this again myself.
Well, that was it, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to call the doctor. They're going to put it on my notes. Nothing will really happen. Like,
yeah,
that's
it.
That's
so sad, isn't it? Yeah.
Which I'm hoping with that new law that's come in, that will change, because I had the fourth one, and then because I knew it was natural and it all naturally happened, we then left it a month before we tried again, because I was like, let me just double check everything's okay, my cycle's okay, back to normal, like there's nothing sinister going on. But yeah, so with Isla, when I was pregnant with Isla, I had to really fight for the early scans again.
Did you?
Yeah, and my GP was brilliant. He was like, yeah, absolutely no worries, I will refer you on. And I was being passed between 2 different places, like the EPU and the recurrent miscarriage clinic, because I'd had George. So it was like, is it, isn't it, it's you. And it took me a good week and a half on the phone, battling every day to try and just get some scans.
No way.
Yeah, so I had an 8-week and 10-week with Isla, and then a 12-week. So I'd missed the 6-week because of the to and fro-in and trying to get scans. No, so hopefully again with this law that would not be
such
the
a
case
win.
Either.
Well done, Mylene. Well done.
I know, and Tommy's like great charity.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully nobody. But again, I don't know if people know that's changed or that's come in. So that's really, really good.
Amazing. So I mean, gosh, going through this, I know you talked about friends and family, but surely that it had an impact on your relationships. I mean, your marriage, family and friends. I don't know whether you're in situations where you might have distanced yourself from a couple of people as well. Just not wanting to be around certain people. I know you said about escaping with certain friends, and they were really supportive, but I can only imagine it had an impact on your relationships, or some of them at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, the first 3 were the previous relationship. I mean, the relationship had other issues, but I think it was definitely a catalyst, 100%. And then, I think the fourth one with Matt by my side was just, again, it was a completely different experience because we had George.
Yeah.
But it was one of those, I didn't feel, again, it might have been because I had George, but I didn't feel that need to, I don't know, release or detach, or I didn't have that with the fourth one. But like I did after the first 3. I think a lot of people would have seen me just detaching and jumping on a plane and doing all those things, and didn't understand it, didn't really know what was going on, didn't, and that's fine. And obviously, like I said, distances were created, and that's absolutely fine. I don't expect anybody to be able to understand it. At that time, I didn't understand it either.
No, I mean, there's no process in how you know, manage grief, is there? You just
No,
got to do what you got to do in that moment.
that's it. And whether it's right or wrong, but who's to say whether it's right or wrong? That I
Yeah.
think that was the thing as well. I mean, it's what I needed at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Was it a healthy way of dealing with it on paper? No, probably not, because I wasn't actually dealing with any of the emotions or process of what was happening. But I did eventually do that. But I think I had to just detach and almost get myself out of that situation. Like I said, it was so intense. My pregnancies were so quick after my losses.
Yeah.
It was just, and I think it was because I said after having the third, it was like, right, something is wrong, therefore this needs to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I'd known for like a year, was getting pregnant, losing, symptom checking. You know what I mean? That's all I'd known for like a year. So it was like, I need to just completely detach from this. And it was a friend actually that said to me when I was talking to her about it, she said, "Yonya, how are you?" I was like, yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I've done this weekend. Da, 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 da. And she said, "And how are you about the miscarriage?" And I was like, yeah, fine. You know, it was this about the third one. And she said to me a few weeks after, she said, you just were so detached from that conversation. Like you just weren't talking as if it was you, that it happened to you. You were telling me as if it was somebody at work or somebody you knew. And like you were just giving me the facts. There was no emotion in it. So she was like, I knew that you weren't processing it.
Yeah, you weren't.
And I just I just had she's like, I just had to wait for you to almost come full circle to be like, right, now I need to deal with it. But like I said, some people didn't understand that process, and that's fine. I think unless you've been in that person's shoes, and then I don't really think you can comment on that, if you know what I mean. You can be there, or you can choose not to be there, and that was absolutely fine. I never held it against anybody that chose to not be there, let's say.
No, of course. I mean, it's definitely something that, like, I would never ask somebody, oh, are you going to get pregnant? Are you going to have another kid? Or, you know, after they get married, it's like the automatic thing. And I think we've talked about this before, haven't we? But, you know, I would never ask that question anymore, because you just don't know what that question might do to someone. You know, we don't know what's happening behind closed doors and how triggering that can be. But people still do it. And I think it comes from a very innocent, just, you know, place. But it has such kind of catastrophic impact on some people, especially like someone like yourself that's going through that, especially if you're not sharing that, which is absolutely fine during that journey. So yeah, it's definitely something that I've learned over the years.
Like I didn't share it. So I told people, like close friends, but I didn't, I don't know, put anything out on social media or tell everybody that I knew, or do you know what I mean? I didn't do that at all, which was just a personal choice. I've seen a lot on our social media as well when we're looking at different pages. You know, some people really, really talk about it on social media when they have a miscarriage. I think that's brilliant. I think, do you know what? Maybe I should have done that, and it's part of their healing process, and maybe that would have made me heal a bit quicker. I don't know, but I think it's brilliant when they do that. But yeah, 100%. I think it's a generation thing. I don't know if it's a society thing. But asking somebody when they're going to have a baby, or when, you know, because it's not even miscarriages that are just the issue. There's so many different fertility problems.
Yeah.
And I just, like you said, that question is so triggering. And I remember when somebody asked me once, and I turned around and said, well, I've lost 3, so I don't know. And they were like,
mic drop.
And I think, obviously, I then felt really bad because I was so angry at that question.
Yeah.
I was thinking, you've just got no idea. And I know it's coming from a good place, but back off. Like,
it was
just such a triggering question. I can't remember who that was now, but sorry.
So, I mean, what's made you decide to share your experience more openly now? I mean, do you think it has been helpful for you to talk about it, especially now on this episode as well?
Yeah, I think so, because I think it's one of those, like we said, it's a taboo subject. And if anybody has gone through it, it is, for me, it was such a lonely experience. And even though it's so common, it's so, because it's happening to you mentally and physically.
Yeah.
No matter who's around you, that it's also affecting, because it will affect, you know, the father, the partner, the, you know, parents, whoever. I just felt so lonely and like I was the only person in the world going through it, and that nobody could understand my pain. I had, like I said before, my mum had had miscarriages, but in between having children. So I just thought she had no idea, because I'd obviously hadn't had children when I had my first three. And I didn't know anybody else that had miscarried before having a child. So there was nobody I could talk to and relate to that was like a friend or family member. So I just felt it was so, so lonely. And it was only sort of months later when I was talking to somebody at work, actually, and he opened up. We went for a drink after work, and he sort of opened up about him and his wife and the troubles that they'd had with miscarriages, and that their pregnancies were under specialist care and stuff like that. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, where have you been? I've needed this conversation for just somebody to get it. And to think, oh, it's not just me.
No,
it's not just me. And also that there is hope as well, like, because it is such a hopeless feeling that you, like I said at the beginning, like your body just can't do what it's built to do. And it's a horrible, you're fighting with yourself essentially. But if you'd have told me 6 years ago that I'd have 2 healthy children,
beautiful healthy children,
I wouldn't believe you at all, so it's just, I just want to give that. And I know not everybody has that sort of ending, which breaks my heart, but the care is out there. And also it's important to say my care was all NHS as well, so I was prepared to pay private, but I thought, you know what, no, I'm going to go the NHS route. At this point I just wanted anything. So it was all NHS. So I then feel, even though not all experiences were great, actually my care afterwards and the managing of the pregnancies was brilliant.
Good. And that's really nice. That's really nice to hear, isn't it? Especially with like how things are at the moment in the world of the NHS. But it's just, it's mental, because how many people do we know who have experienced this? And there's probably so many people that, even friends that I might not know have even gone through this, because it's something that I still feel is not talked enough about. And why don't we know more about it? Why don't we learn stuff like this, like in school? When we don't learn about stuff like this, the actual reality of life. And it's, I think it's when people say things, I can only imagine that people might say, and it comes from a good place, but it was probably for the best, or it'll happen for you one day, keep trying, or have you tried this? And I'm sure you got to a point, I'm sure you heard things like that, I could be wrong, but I can only imagine that people say that, and it comes from a good place, but it comes across probably quite patronizing and very unhelpful in those situations. I don't know whether you had anybody say stuff like that.
I did. And it was those, I guess it's those people that had just not been in that situation before and didn't know. So it was like, oh, don't worry, there's always next time. You'll get pregnant again. I'm thinking, well, yeah, that's not the issue. They're getting pregnant. It's keeping it. And I am a strong believer in everything happens for a reason, but I think when you're going through trauma, that's just not what you want to hear.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Because on reflection, everything did happen for a reason, and without this journey I wouldn't have George and Isla. But at the time, everything happens for a reason. You're thinking, I've just lost 3 babies, like come on,
give me a
just
break.
give me a cuddle instead. Like, that's all I need. But I think it's one of those, it depends how you deal with it, and it's one of those where people on the outside might just be thinking, I don't know what to say, so I'm just going to say this, because it is difficult if you've not been through it. What do you say to somebody? But I guess my advice, if you know somebody going through it, is just give them a hug.
And that's actually my next question, I suppose, to end on, really, is, if someone's listening to this now who's going through a very similar experience, what gentle words of encouragement would you like to offer them?
I think it's to process what you're going through in your way. There's no right way to deal with a miscarriage or a loss. There's nothing on paper that says this is how it should be done. So it's very personal. So deal with the grief and the process in your own way. But if you can, don't shut people out. That's definitely what I did. Like I said, that detachment, don't deal with it. I think it made me crash just that bit harder when I then realized I had to. Also talk to somebody. So I found my therapy really useful because for me, it was somebody neutral.
Yeah.
It was somebody that I wasn't a friend, wasn't family, wasn't a doctor in that sense, that had dealt with me. And obviously our inbox is always open as well.
Thanks, Laura. Oh yeah, thanks so much for being brave to let us in and listen to your story. I'm sure it has made people feel a little less alone in their own journeys. I think, as you said, I think you'd agree in regards to grief, like you have to take it step by step, isn't it? Healing is not a straight line. But you are stronger than you think, and you will, yeah, that will carry you through. It will. And I think in regards to miscarriages, I think talking about loss of a baby must be so scary and painful. But as women, I think you owe it to yourselves to acknowledge the loss, to allow yourselves to grieve. You know, you can't change the pain of the experience, but you can change the isolation and fear that comes with it. So, like Laura said, you know, don't be afraid to talk about your experiences, because at the end of the day, it's your story and it matters. So that brings us to the end of our episode. Thank you all, as always, for listening and taking the time to listen to us. If anyone would like to come on our podcast to talk about their experience, whether it's around this topic or anything regarding parenthood, then just drop us a message on our socials and we would love to chat with you. Speak to you soon. Bye.